the Department of Footprint Measurement because they did a real huge work on preparing and drafting this publication, which is a huge step for us in maintaining the high level of scientific rigorousness that we have. So thank you the whole team for this huge work. We made the choice of a quite short webinar. I'm very sorry for that. The whole publication would have deserved like a full day webinar, but you will obviously be able to download the publication at the end of the presentation. And before giving the floor to Patrick Cambourg, I just want to introduce him because, of course, he is worldwide known. He's the chair of the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board, and we are very happy that he could join us today as drafted the forward of the publication. And as the chair of the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board, he put an enormous amount of work into drafting some ambitious and yet practical ESRS that will change the way economic actors are taking up sustainable challenges. So without further ado, I'll give the floor, Patrick, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon to all, and I wish you a very good seminar. Even if brief, as mentioned just a minute ago. First of all, the quality of the document which has been prepared by CDC Biodiversity on the GBS is, I would like to commend, because it is, extremely good stuff, and with a lot of information, valuable information. And we all know how difficult it is to meet the expectations under Target 15 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So it's not easy. So organizations that are striving to make it happen are, of course, pivotal in the recognition of nature and biodiversity as critical factors for sustainable development, for companies, but also for society in general. And we all know what the challenges are. So I will not expand too much, but it is very important to bear in mind the importance of people that are trying to contribute, because nature and biodiversity are often described as a topic that is still not mature. This is, of course, a little bit true, but it's not really true. In other words, you already have significant efforts, maybe not as developed as for climate, but nevertheless, it's not uncharted territory. And in that respect, I would like to highlight 2 points. The first one is that, maybe three. The first one is that we are very proud at European level to have introduced into the first set of European sustainability reporting standards, the ESRS, adopted by the Commission at the end of July last year, nature as a key element, and in particular in E4, ESRS E4, biodiversity and ecosystems. We feel that among the environmental challenges, nature and biodiversity are to be addressed. So we have introduced this. We had long discussions, of course, about how deep we should be going. And for those who are familiar with that standard, it is clear that some elements of compromise have been finally, introduced to reflect the big step but absolutely necessary step that reporting on nature and acting on nature represent. So E4 for us is a big step forward because, as you know, about 50,000 companies representing 50% of GDP in the EU will have to report. I hope they don't take this as a compliance exercise, but that as a management exercise, and that they introduce in their management, in their risk management to start with, but in their management more broadly, nature as a key element to create the right factors for value creation long-term, value creation being understood as value creation from a financial standpoint, but also from a social or societal standpoint. So that was my first point. My second point, and they were in EFRAG offices this morning, TNFD is, of course, a big step forward, and we are very glad, as we stated publicly, that E4 is compatible, consistent with the recommendations of TNFD. We worked in parallel, and we discussed this morning. We wish to clarify further how one and the other, in fact, work or may work hand in hand. In other words, for us, the goal is that people reporting under ESRS can be considered as, applying the TNFD recommendations. There is a difference between a framework based on recommendations and standards which are more precise and that explain the how to report in more details. So that's my second point. And my third point is, of course, to encourage the development of methodologies, because as you have seen, metrics, detailed metrics, and also metrics summarizing a footprint are not necessarily obvious from day one. At least a few years back, they were, of course, a bit unknown. And that's why initiatives such as GBS or also MSA, but there are a few others as well, need to develop, to get recognition, to be acknowledged as being a good reference to be used, because as you have seen, under E4, we give directions, but we also leave an element of flexibility, because it will take a little time to mature a little more and get to the ideal information. We have to be modest, but also ambitious. Modest because it's a journey, and ambitious because we want to reach the destination. And the destination is to report, of course, not the final destination, but to know what we are talking about and then report on it, but also act on it. So in that respect, I am very impressed by what is being done. By the way, under many fora, I know your club. I know also the relationships you have with that CDC Biodiversity has with other organizations. All of this is extremely encouraging, and I wish you now more detailed discussions and very fruitful discussions. Even if it's only 1 hour, it's not most messages can go through in 1 hour. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I wish you a good seminar.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for all these words, for these kind words, and we take up this challenge to make it very interesting in 1 hour. Indeed, I mean, and it's actually what you are saying. It's a very key moment for biodiversity footprinting, for GBS, for CDC Biodiversité, for the club, because with the RSRS, E4 especially, but with all this legal and international framework that is putting in place step by step, we know how to find a correct place for the GBS, for biodiversity footprinting, into this mainstreaming basically of biodiversity related strategies. And thank you again for all this work, because it participates to this, and we really, and this publication is going to this way. We made the strong choice to remain under the balance between like a tool which is basically easily usable, easily understandable by private actors and the whole community, while at the same time take into account the whole complexity of biodiversity accounting, biodiversity understanding, etc. And this publication is indeed like an important moment for us, as we show that we want the methodology to be as scientifically robust as possible, to be as close as possible to recent scientific literature. And you can basically, what I'm saying today is that you can count on us to put as much work on continuing the development of the GBS as on accompanying more and more companies and financial institutions to take up this change. And basically to do this, we will of course rely on this ecosystem that we created. There is now a community of assessors, of private actors, companies. And this is basically the way we also thought the organization of publication, between the practicality of the GBS and how it works and how it's being implemented by the private actors, with some parties on the key concept of the GBS and the ecosystem, the role of the GBS and some case study. And let me thank also Vattenfall that is present today, that will present the case study that is in the publication. But also some very scientific relative elements on the new concepts of the GBS, all the new developments that we basically put forward the last years. And afterwards, of course, the last part on the updates on methodological development. And basically this whole organization and trying to find the right balance between the two is our way of proceed, and we will keep doing so in the next months and next years. So thank you again, Patrick, and I will now give the floor to Élisa, whom I especially thank, because it's thanks to her that we have today this publication. And thank you again, Élisa, and I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you very much, Arthur. So I think we had some trouble with the sound. I hope it's now better, but let us know if it's not, and we will try to make the changes so that you can hear us well. So indeed, we are very happy to launch this new publication on the GBS today, which actually covers a lot of topics, including more on the ecosystem, but also on really technical and developments of the tool. So we will now present a bit further the publication content, and I will after also let the floor to Berger, who greatly contributed to the publication and works as a senior advisor to the biodiversity footprint direction at CDC Biodiversité. So as you know, so today we are happy to release this new publication, which is called Global Biodiversity Score, accounting for positive and negative impacts through the value chain. And this is a work that was coordinating by the Mission Économie of Biodiversity, Mission Économie de la Biodiversité in French, which is an initiative financed by the Banque des Territoires under the Caisse des Dépôts group, and which has different objectives, which are really to identify, study, but also experiment innovative tools to connect biodiversity and economy, and which share its works through publications such as this one and various supports. So I don't know if some of you already had see previous publications. The latest one on the GBS was on the Global Biodiversity Score, establishing an ecosystem of stakeholders to measure the biodiversity performance of human activities. And it's also available with all our publication on our website. So you can also refer to the previous publication. And in this one, we also have some reference to previous ones. So we also can invite you to have a look at this new publication. And if you have time and want to dig further certain concepts, it's also interesting to have a look at the previous ones. Sorry, it went a bit fast. So this is to give you a quick overview of the publication content and what you can find in the publication. So this was to give you a quick overview before publishing the publication, which will be online very soon, so that you can see what it looks like in the kind of illustrations, the kind of concepts that are inside. And to already say a bit more on what is in this publication. So as we already said, we have a foreword from Patrick de Cambourg, who had the pleasure to be here for the introduction. And we also have some reminders on the key concept around the Global Biodiversity Score and its ecosystem. So it's really to give you the basic knowledge to understand the key elements behind the tool. There is also a contextualization exercise of the overall landscape for biodiversity footprint assessment and for the GBS. So it will give you an overview of the existing initiative, existing tools on biodiversity footprint and on biodiversity more globally. Then we also take this opportunity to present new concepts on biodiversity footprint and on the GBS with some illustration to make it a bit more understandable. We also have some focus on GBS methodological developments, or more specifically, we present a new module on overfishing, and we also have a presentation of how we calculate climate change static impacts with the GBS. And finally, we are also very happy to present the results from Vattenfall biodiversity footprint assessment, and we will be very happy to have Josefin Blanck presenting this work just after this presentation during the webinar. So now to give you more examples of what you can find actually in the publication. So for example, on the first section, which is on key concepts, you will have some content on what is behind the GBS. And one very key element is how you take into account the temporality. And in the GBS, so we account for stocks and for variation of stocks of biodiversity. So as you might be familiar with, to account for the biodiversity state, it really requires to distinguish the stocks of remaining biodiversity, what we also call the accumulated positive impacts, stock of past accumulated impacts up to a given moment, so up to an assessment, which are what we call the static, as I just said, or accumulated negative impacts, but also some variation of stocks during the period which is assessed. So in the publication, we will really try to illustrate, for example, the linkages between indicators that can be tracked by companies or financial institutions, and also the intensities of pressure and how it actually translates into periodic gains and losses on biodiversity. So you have here a table with some example of how changes in economic activities can impact biodiversity through changes in the intensity of pressures. And in this table, so you have some example on different kind of pressures, such as climate change, land use, but also hydrological disturbance due to direct water use. And it gives you, depending on what's happening, what will be the result in terms of change in the state of biodiversity. So for example, for land use, which has a corresponding indicator, which would be land occupation for a company. So if you have a constant land occupation, this will lead to no change in the state of biodiversity, whereas if you have some ecological restoration activities involving a conversion from intensive land to more natural land uses, that would lead to a periodic gain. So this is to give you really an example of what the publication will allow you to actually understand, and also get to understand a bit more how the GBS works. And the idea is really to give you some example and some illustrations to get all of this concept a bit more clearer. So for this concept of stocks and variation of stocks, you have in the publication an illustration, which is the example for hydrological disturbance, which really shows you what happens if you are first in a situation with no disturbation, so you are in an undisturbed situation, and then moving from a situation with some human withdrawal, so human disturbance, and then adding at each stage some new elements. So for example, in the first stage you have no disturbance, then you have some disturbance from human activities, and then the situation evolves, and the idea is really to get you to understand what is the implication in terms of the intensity of pressure and how it translates into biodiversity gains or losses. So we really invite you to have a look at this concept, and we hope it will make all of these elements and concepts and terms that we're using really often actually when we are talking about biodiversity footprinting, and when we are actually conducting biodiversity footprint assessment. So we hope it will help all of you understand a bit better these elements. And then another very key aspect of the publication is really to relate the Global Biodiversity Score and biodiversity footprinting with what's new in the actuality. So as you know, the TNFD provides a framework for nature-related risk management and disclosure. And in the publication, we really did the exercise to relate the GBS with this work. And in particular, so the TNFD has a 4-step approach on nature-related impact, dependencies, risk, and opportunities, which is a LEAP approach for locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare. And you will find in the publication all the link and how the GBS can be actually used in combination, of course, with other tools and approaches to connect with this LEAP approach. So you will find some figures which really show these linkages at each phase of the framework, so both for locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare, and also pointing out some additional data sources which can be used to complement the GBS outputs. So here, for example, you have the illustration for the locate phase, which is really on the interface with nature. And here the idea is to show that, for example, as part of the locate phase, so you will have to work on dependency and impact screening. So for this, the GBS allows you actually to screen your impact and dependencies on biodiversity across your value chain and direct operations. And then for all the aspects linked with really interface with nature, but also with sensitive locations. So the idea is really that with the data that is fed into the GBS, which can be fed and should include actually also site level data on pressures, which also allow you to assess ecosystem integrity at each location and actually answer to the 3rd step of the locate phase, which is an interface with nature. And as displayed in this figure, other data sources, such as, for example, IBAT, are also required to go beyond integrity and really identify, for instance, areas of high biodiversity importance to work on the 4th phase, which is on the interface with sensitive locations. So the idea is really to show you what are the linkages and what are other tools that can be useful to answer to these phases of the LEAP approach. Then you also have actually the most direct use of the Global Biodiversity Score, which really occurs during the evaluate phase of the LEAP approach, which concentrates on impacts and dependencies, as it's explained in this 2nd figures. So the idea is really that the tool allows you to identify and analyze both the dependencies actually and impacts on ecosystem integrity in MSA square kilometer, as it is expected actually in phase E2 and E3. So you can also complement this analysis to have a full picture, notably on the impact on endangered species and areas of high biodiversity importance. And for this, you can also use other tools and metrics such as star units, for example, for endangered species. So once again, the idea is really to connect with the GBS, but also identify other tools that can be of help to respond to this LEAP approach. Then we have the assess phase on risks and opportunities. And the idea is really that this phase can derive from the analysis from GBS outputs to conduct a risk and opportunity materiality assessment, as it is reminded in this figure. So the idea that in practice, the impacts that are actually assessed with the Global Biodiversity Score can be considered as proxy of the transition risks, as companies with higher impact on biodiversity are more at risk, for example, of reputational or legal risk, and are more exposed also to market and regulatory risk. And similarly, the dependencies which are assessed with the GBS can also be used as proxy of the physical risk, as companies which rely heavily on ecosystem services are more at risk if those ecosystem services stop being provided by nature. So all this analysis can also help you answering the assess phase. And this is once again the kind of information you can find in the publication. And finally, but I won't speak too long, you also have this exercise for the last phase, which is the prepare phase to respond and report. And the idea that with the GBS, it actually allows you to set targets and define strategies, notably when you're conducting a biodiversity footprint assessment using the GBS. So this will allow you to also respond to the prepare phase. And now we will move to another aspect that is actually presented in the publication, which is for the overall landscape section on the biodiversity impact measurement tool that exists. And I will let the floor to Joshua for this section.
Thanks, Élisa. So this mapping has been published for a number of years now, and we received very positive feedback on it. So we were happy to update it again for this year. And we made a few changes. So I'm going to help you go through the mapping. In columns, you've got the focus areas of the map. So you can distinguish between public policy, financial assets, and then corporate. So public policy, it's tools that are used to, for instance, assess the impact on biodiversity of global policies, such as changing diets, having more sustainable agriculture, etc. And so you've got the Global Bio tool from the PBL and the Living Planet Index from WWF. And then you've got all the corporate and financial focus areas. So this year we broke down financial assets from corporate, especially because there are a number of new tools for financial assets, which I'm going to detail later. Then you've got supply options, so comparing different supply options, for instance, in terms of copper or cocoa sourcing. Then product and services, so for instance, distinguishing the impacts of different types of car, like electric cars, thermal cars, and then services like water depollution, and then project or site level assessment. So then in the table, you've got all the tools which do impact assessment, footprint measurement, and they answer to different business applications. So in terms of rows, you've got 3 rows. If we start with the first one, the A1, so that's assessment or rating by third parties with external data. And so only a few tools are able to do that. And for instance, assess the impact of a company such as, let's say, Nestle, for instance, with external data, either public data from Nestle or private data, commercially available data, etc. And for instance, the GBS is one of the tools which can do this, assessing companies based on external data. Then you've got the second business application, which is biodiversity accounting for external audited disclosure. So you've got 2 keywords here. The first one is accounting. So that's not just measurement and hotspot screening of impacts, but detailed accounting with an audit trail where you're able to understand exactly the stocks and variation of stocks. You want some accuracy, and then you are able, so that's the second keyword, you're able to audit the impact. And so, for instance, that would be in line with what we want for the CSRD. And then the third business application on the last row is all the other types of biodiversity management and performance assessments. So we've seen the columns, the rows, and then you've got different colors. So what are the colors? That's what you see on the caption at the bottom. That's the different metrics. So you've got aggregated metrics and metrics which are not aggregated. For the aggregated metrics, you've got 4 main types of metrics. Ecosystem metrics in green. So you've got the MSA, the mean species abundance, and the PDF, potentially disappeared fraction. Now you also have a few, since our mapping, you have also now a few additional metrics like ecosystem integrity index or biodiversity intactness index, which are used by some new corporate and financial tools. So they are not in this mapping, but they will also fall within the ecosystem part of the metrics. And so if we look at the mapping, what is interesting is we see that for MSA, we've got a range of tools going from Global Bio for public policy to BIA GBS, so biodiversity impact analytics powered by the GBS, Encore, the corporate biodiversity footprint from Iceberg Data Lab, the global impact database from Impact Institute, and then to corporate, so the GBS, the CBF detail, to supply ocean tools like the biodiversity impact metric from CISL, the biodiversity footprint calculator from PlanSub at the product, service, or project site level, and the BIntact tool from the FAO, which all use the MSA. So you've got a continuum of coherent tools using the same metric, and that's really a strength. For PDF, you also have that to some extent, and it's used by tools like Biodiversity Footprint for Financial Institutions, some databases like BIAT from ISS, and the Global Impact Database from Impact Institute use both MSA and PDF. Many lifecycle assessment methods use the PDF, etc. So PDF is also used by a number of tools, but you've got slightly more of them for the MSA. Then you've got, in terms of metrics, you've got species, population, and especially population abundance. So that's not used by corporate business-facing tools, but that's used by the Living Planet Index. Then you've got species with a focus on extinction risk. And here you've got mainly one tool, which is STAR, which is kind of both a tool and a unit from the IUCN. And STAR is included to some extent in IBAT, Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool, through a STAR layer at the global level, and in the Encore tool, which we have on the top left. So what to make of it? Is STAR in competition with the MSA? We think no. We think that's complementary because you need to measure both ecosystems and species. And so you need to have both, something using the MSA, for instance, and extinction risk units with STAR. Then you've got the EPNL from Kering at the corporate level and also used by other companies. And that uses a monetary unit like euros for impact valuation. And then you've got some tools like BZ, which is used at the site level for the extractive industry at the beginning, which use elementary indicators. So it doesn't use a specific aggregated metric, but it uses a number of different indicators at the site level. So we hope this mapping is useful for you. And yeah, to mention maybe a few tools which are not on it and which have emerged since then. You've got especially tools for finance. So you've got S&P TrueCost, which developed the Nature and Biodiversity Risk tool using the EII metric. Then you've got MSCI, we developed the tool using PDF and MSA. And finally, Bloomberg, we developed the tool using the Biodiversity Intelligence Index. So if we move to the next slide, we are going to move to another topic, which is of, I think, huge interest to many people, and there were a lot of expectations about that. So we try to contribute to the clarification of definitions on three concepts. So positive impacts, avoided impacts, and reduced impacts. There was some, historically, there has been some confusion around the three and mixing between the three concepts. So in the report, we provide hopefully some clarification around that. And we provide also an example, which we're not going to detail today, on wastewater treatment services. So I encourage you to look at the reports for more detail. For each of the type of impacts, you have to distinguish between what occurs within the period of assessment, so usually 1 year, and what can be accrued over time. And so you can always consider accrued positive impact or accrued negative impact, accumulated negative impact. So if we start with the easy one, negative impact, you see it's in different colors because negative impacts can be linked to a number of pressures on biodiversity, and that's the color usually used by the IPBES to describe the different pressures. So negative impacts, it's losses of biodiversity, and that can be periodic losses if we use the vocabulary from the Biological Diversity Protocol, or dynamic losses if we use the GBS wording. And they accrue into accumulated negative impact over time, or static impact in the GBS wording. Positive impacts, it's a bit less straightforward. And nicely, we have a definition from PBAF, the Partnership Biodiversity Accounting Financials, which has been used for project finance, but which we think can be expanded to more uses. So the definition is more animals, plants, and or microbes, improving the health of the natural ecosystem in a specific location and time frame. And the last part is important, as a result of human intervention. So it's quite easy. If you see more animals, more tigers, more butterflies, etc., more plants, more microbes, then you have a gain of biodiversity and you've got positive impact. If it's natural regeneration without human intervention, you cannot claim that as a positive impact as a corporate, but if you have some human intervention, then you can claim it. So that requires to actually enhance biodiversity and achieve real periodic biodiversity gains, and not just a reduction in the level of pressure. And that's compared to a baseline set in the past. So compared to a time where you had like 10 tigers, now you've got 12, then you've got a gain of +2 tigers, for instance. Two kinds of action make positive impacts possible. So regeneration or restoration. Regeneration is more compatible with current human uses. And restoration is when you move from a degraded state due to human use to a more natural state for an ecosystem, where you actually restore the ecosystem. Reduced impact. So it's not a reduced impact is different from a positive impact. A reduced impact is defined for a periodic loss. So it's important. It's not about an accumulated negative impact. It's about a periodic loss. So you reduce and minimize the periodic loss without eliminating it. So it means it's compared to an earlier time. So it's compared to a baseline value in the past. And we are going to show a figure to make it clear. So for instance, you go from a loss of 5 every year to a loss of only 4. So you are not improving biodiversity, but just you are losing less. Avoided negative impacts, that's also not a positive impact, and that's a periodic loss also, which is prevented and entirely eliminated, for instance, thanks to an alternative solution or technology. And so by definition, avoided negative impacts are compared to counterfactual scenario. And you can have a number of counterfactual scenarios, and currently there is no consensus about them. So CDC Biodiversité is working on them, especially at the sectoral level. So you could potentially use them for the sectoral scenarios to use as an assessment, a counterfactual scenario for an assessment of avoided impact. You can avoid impacts through spatial, technological, or temporal solutions. I'm not going to detail them for the sake of time, but you have more details on the report. And so finally, this chart. So what is represented here is the negative impacts at the bottom, below the red line, which is the time, and the positive impacts above the red line, which is the time. And then so it's over time. So we start at the beginning, the company, that's the impacts of the company. It has a number of impacts broken down by IP-based pressures, so land and sea use change, direct exploitation, etc. And it reduces its impact thanks to some actions like switching to more recycled content, etc. So the negative impacts from the different pressures are reduced. And compared to the baseline, which is the first year, you see in light gray that you have reduced impact. So you start at, let's say, -5 impacts every year, and then you go to only -4. So you got a reducing impact of 1. And then at the end of the period, for instance, you are at only -1. So you've got a reduced impact of 4 per year. And then the business actually would have grown. And in a business as usual scenario, for instance, you'd have a growth rate of, let's say, 2%. And so its impact would have increased with the same impact intensity. And compared to that counterfactual of growth, it hasn't not increased its impact. So you also have avoided impacts compared to the business as usual. That's the dark gray. And finally, the company contributes to restoration and regeneration of ecosystem at the same time as its negative impact. And so that's dark green and light green at the top. And we can calculate. So CDC Biodiversité recommends quite strongly to report separately positive and negative impacts. But then for communication purposes, on top of the separate reporting of negative and positive impact, you can calculate a net impact, while you should keep in mind that you have to apply the mitigation hierarchy. So you should start with avoidance of impacts, then reduction of impacts, and then having positive actions. And so the net impact here is the dashed line in white. And that's the difference between the negative impacts and the positive impacts. And so you can see that reduced and avoided impacts do not play into are not used in the calculation of the net impact. That's only the positive and negative impact. That's it on my side. That's next.
Thank you very much, Joshua, for the very interesting elements. And I will now give the floor to Vattenfall. Thank you so much, Josefin.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well? Hope so. So my name is Josefin Blanck. I work in Vattenfall in our strategic corporate environmental function, and I will share today a bit of the work that we've done together with CDC on our biodiversity footprint assessment. And you can take the next slide, please. And actually the next one. Yeah, so just to frame our work a little bit. So the energy transition, reaching our climate targets, will have an impact on nature through the commissioning of new renewable capacity and the infrastructure that is needed. And to do this in a sustainable way, we need to look at the energy system and the production in a holistic way to minimize our footprint and enable coexistence. And across the company, we have committed to a biodiversity net positive impact approach to guide our work. And this means that we are committed not only to reduce the impacts, but also work to positively contribute by implementing various biodiversity enhancement measures, restoration, etc. And in order to be able to steer towards our 2030 ambition, we see a number of key areas that we need to work more with in order to succeed and in order to set measurable biodiversity targets. We need to measure our impacts in a full value chain perspective. We need to also be able to calculate the positive effects that the different projects that we implement contribute to. And we see that we need to develop new ways to collect and use and analyze biodiversity data, because a lot more data will be needed. And if you take the next slide, so a fundamental part of our biodiversity strategy is therefore to investigate how we can find appropriate ways to measure impacts and improve target setting. And we decided to join the corporate engagement program in the Science-Based Target for Nature when it started, and as a way to contribute to road testing of different methodologies and metrics. And as a starting point, we decided to do a full corporate biodiversity footprint assessment, including the whole value chain perspective. And the objective was mainly to comply with the first step in the SBTN framework, but also feed into the second and third step. Measuring our biodiversity footprint in a quantitative way would also potentially give us a preliminary baseline that could be used to set a more defined net positive impact target on corporate level. So that was very interesting for us as well, going into this work. And if you take the next slide, just to show you a little bit what was included in, can you take the next one? There, thank you. So the biodiversity footprint assessment that we did in 2021 covered the majority of our operations and the main locations where Vattenfall has operations. For scope 3 downstream impacts, we included only sales of gas, because it's the biggest part. And also for our own operations, we did not include solar, since it was quite a small part of our operations at that point. And also distribution in Germany was excluded from the assessment because it was recently sold when we did the work. And the data in our case study is based on data from 2020. And the next slide, if you take no, one back, I think. Okay. Yeah, then I will not show that because it was not included. Okay, take the next one. There was one slide missing here. So this is an example of how the calculations that was based on financial, spatial, and operational data was presented get a refined materiality impact assessment. As a first step, we used the tool that was available from SBTN, but then we used GBS to get this refined assessment of our operations, which was very good and complementary to the tool. And the results that you can see here is also in the publication, displays the share of impacts caused by each pressure, but also per reporting unit. So we can see for each of the reporting units what to prioritize in terms of reducing impacts. And the results that we have, we can see, and that was the slide that was missing, so I will just go through it. But we have assessed both terrestrial and aquatic impacts, and we see that when it comes to the main historical, the accumulated static impact, this is caused by land occupations, and about 30% of our footprint is from own operations, and the rest is in scope 3. And the biggest part of our footprint in supply chain is due to land occupation for biomass plantations, raw material extractions of fuels, and the production of electrical equipment. And in scope 1, the 30% is the main part is connected to the distribution or the land needed for the distribution grid. And then when we see and assess our yearly increase in biodiversity footprint, we can see that almost 95% of the total impact comes from greenhouse gas emissions. And this emphasizes the importance also of reducing our climate emissions in line with the 1.5 degree trajectory, and also shows how interlinked climate and biodiversity is, and emphasize the importance of coexistence so that we can build a fossil-free energy system in the same way, protect biodiversity. And if you take the next slide, yeah, okay, there it was in the wrong order. So here you can see, and maybe we can send this out, it will be available afterwards. You can take the next one. You can see also the illustration here. You can go back one, and I will just have a remark on that. The figure here on the left side is from our annual sustainability report in 2022. So you can also find it there, and there you can see the split between scope 1 and scope 3, and also a bit more detail on the dynamic impacts. Now, please, you can take the next slide. So on an overarching level, 3 main areas have been identified and pointed out in the biodiversity footprint assessment as areas where we should prioritize efforts within. And these areas are concluded after the modeling of data using the GBS, but also after doing an additional value chain assessment, where we looked at where in our value chain we have biodiversity hotspots, and also an analysis looking at where we have the biggest sphere of influence on our different types of impacts. And looking at these 3 areas, we're already doing a lot today, which is of course good, but the next step is also to evaluate our current strategies and targets, to identify gaps and areas where we need to, for example, be focusing more on setting measurable targets. We have a science-based target for climate. We also have a CO2 reduction target for supply chains. Of course, continuing to implement that and reduce climate emissions is key. Then we also have the land use impact from the distribution grid that I mentioned earlier, where we have mapped over 8,600 kilometers of power line corridors, and we have from this work identified 1,600 areas that we call biodiversity hotspots, where we have developed specific management plans that will enhance biodiversity, and we've set a target by the end of 2025. We will at least have taken measures and implemented measures in 70% of these identified biodiversity hotspots. But now we're also looking into how we can scale up this work and how we can broaden the work that has already been started. And then the third area is connected to biomass sourcing, where we source residual products from fine woody debris, treetops, branches, also from byproducts or residual products from pellets, from sawdust, etc. And also use certifications, and of course working closely with our suppliers to talk to suppliers about biodiversity performance, and also do routinely audits of them. And if you take the next slide, just to finalize a bit my presentation. So doing a biodiversity footprint assessment has been a really good exercise, I think. For some parts, it was more challenging than for other parts to compile the necessary data that was needed to do such a comprehensive assessment. But it has increased our understanding, and it has also highlighted a few challenges and areas where we need to, for example, improve in order to get more accurate results. We also recently did a SBTN readiness check to see how the work that we did in 2021 comply with the updated SBTN guidance and requirements. And we see that the GBS fulfills the majority of the requirements in step 1. That was the main objective for us to do the biodiversity footprint assessment. So that's really good. But the results has also helped us in several other ways. We use it a lot for communication purposes, for example, as I showed in the annual sustainability report, but also we used it in communication with our executive group management and other parts internally. Then it's also, of course, a very important information of fit into our strategic work in general. So setting targets, setting the roadmap forward towards 2030 and beyond. And also, as you showed from the publication, it's also something that helps us in the implementation of the new CSRD legislation and reporting. And just as a final note, I believe it's been very valuable, this work, because it's also connected us to other companies and organizations that are contributing to the development of new methodologies and metrics, as also mentioned in the welcome speech. And it is challenging to develop robust methods to measure biodiversity. So a collaborative approach here, I think, is really important. And for us, the networking and shared learning process around this has been very valuable. So thank you for letting me present our case study, and look forward to the publication.
Thank you very much, Josefin, for your presentation and for sharing your experience and insights. And we hope also this is something that can be inspiring for others. And so you will find in the publication some of the results of the biodiversity footprint assessments performed by Vattenfall. And so it's time now to actually officially release our new publication. You will find on the screen, and we will also put in the chat the link where you can access our publication. So you will have the possibility to download it. Feel free to share it with everyone that can be interested. You will also receive all this information as a follow-up email of this webinar, and also just a practical information that the webinar is being recorded and will be available in replay. So if you also found this interesting, do not hesitate to share it afterwards with some of your colleagues. And of course, we wish you to enjoy the reading of this new publication. Maybe before closing the webinar, I just would like to say a few words on how you can go further in understanding and using the Global Biodiversity Score, and also more generally how we can help you in your journey to help reversing biodiversity loss. So first of all, if you want to better understand biodiversity footprinting and how to use the GBS, we have several trainings available, and we would be happy to help you also get trained on these topics. We have some fundamentals training to better understand biodiversity footprinting. We have more developed modules if you want to use the GBS and better understand how to use the GBS to also perform biodiversity footprinting assessment. And we also have some specific trainings for financial institutions if you also want to better understand the landscape and regulations you have to abide by. Also, if you would like to exchange on your biodiversity footprinting challenges and remain updated about latest changes in the field, we invite you to join our B4B Plus Club. It's a club with over 50 companies and financial institutions and consultancies, where we regularly meet to exchange about biodiversity footprinting topics. We also make sure to provide literature review on what's happening in the field, and we try also to test innovative approach to go further in measuring biodiversity footprinting of private actors. And we're also trying to innovate in terms of topics we covered. We recently launched, for example, a working group on the biodiversity credits topics. So if you want to get more information also, we would be happy to discuss this further with you. And more globally, we can also support you in different challenges you might be facing. Would it be to better understand your impacts and dependencies on biodiversity, but also to prepare for new regulations and standards, or to help you also reduce your biodiversity footprint by setting quantitative targets. So we have the expertise also to help you on these different challenges. And so if you want to have more information on these different possible support we can provide, do not hesitate to contact us, and we would be happy to discuss about it with you. And so with this, I think we're reaching the time to close this webinar. So I would like to thank you all very much for your interest in our work and for participating to today's webinar. And we look forward to having the opportunity to work with some of you in the future. Thank you.